Welcome to Lifespan, the weekly podcast that digs up the dirt on the most outrageous, chaotic, and downright WTF loves ever lived. All told in a fun and fascinating way. Share, rate, and follow the show for more wild stories. You sent us a fascinating request for a bizarre journey today, and we're diving headfirst, pun absolutely intended, given what we're about to discuss, into the unbelievable life of Sigurd Eysteinsson, better known as Sigurd the Mighty. A 9th-century Norse Earl of Orkney, this guy was a Viking powerhouse, carving out a significant chunk of early Scotland. He was a real force.
Absolutely. When you look at the testimonies you've shared, it's clear Sigurd the Mighty was a key player in the Viking expansion into Scotland. This wasn't just about raiding, he was establishing dominion, laying the groundwork for long-term Norse influence in the region. But it's his end, as you highlighted, that truly makes his story stand out in the sagas.
It's exactly. Forget the heroic death in battle or a peaceful old age. The testimonies we have suggest Sigurd the Mighty met his end in the most ridiculously ironic, almost cartoonishly grim way possible, reportedly killed by the severed head of an enemy he'd already defeated.
It does sound like something from pure legend, doesn't it? A bizarre twist of fate that feels more like folklore than straightforward history, almost too neat to be true.
That's what jumped out at me too, killed by a decapitated head. It's the kind of story you'd swap around a campfire, to send shivers down spines. And as you know from the material you shared, our main source for this wild ride is the Orkneyinga Saga. It's a chronicle of the Earls of Orkney written down in Iceland around 1200 AD, roughly 300 years after Sigurd lived.
And that time gap is really important for you to keep in mind as we explore this. Sagas are incredible historical resources, offering glimpses into the past, but they're also complex pieces of literature. They weave together factual accounts, oral traditions, folklore, heroic narratives, and sometimes even political agendas. Understanding that these were written down centuries after the events, relying on memories and interpretations that shifted over time, is crucial.
So that sets the stage for our bizarre journey into Sigurd's demise. Looking at these testimonies, the big questions that leap out are, how on earth could a severed head cause death? Is there a plausible explanation lurking beneath this outlandish tale? And what can this frankly insane story tell you about the Viking Age in Scotland that other accounts might miss? Let's see what we can unpack.
Okay. To really understand Sigurd's story within the context of the sources you provided, you need to picture 9th century northern Britain. It wasn't the unified Scotland we know today. Instead, you had a collection of fractured kingdoms, primarily Pictish, facing increasing pressure from Viking incursions.
And as the sources emphasize, these weren't just quick raids for plunder, were they? This was a significant shift, a wave of Norse migration, settlement, and outright conquest, fundamentally changing the political landscape of the British Isles.
Precisely. The Orkney and Shetland Islands, strategically located off the north coast of Scotland, became vital stepping stones for this expansion. They served both as a base for further exploration and, according to the sagas, as a source of tension with the emerging power of Norway under King Harald Fairhair.
Right, Harald Fairhair. The saga accounts you shared describe him trying to exert control over exiled Vikings, using the islands as a launchpad to raid Norway itself. So you see a picture of internal Norse power struggles happening alongside their external expansion.
Exactly. And this is where Sigurd Eysteinsson enters the narrative in your sources. He's presented as the son of Eystein Glumra and, crucially, the brother of Ragnvald Eysteinsson. Ragnvald was a significant figure who held the jarldom of Mur in Harald Fairhair's Norway.
Now, the saga narrative, particularly in Heimskringla and the Orkneyinga Saga, lays out a pretty neat story of succession, doesn't it? Apparently, during one of Harald's western campaigns, Ragnvald's son Ivar was killed. As compensation, Harald supposedly granted Ragnvald the Orkney and Shetland Islands, along with the title of Jarl, or Earl.
Right.
But Ragnvald, preferring his home in Norway, then passed the whole package on to his brother Sigurd. It sounds almost too convenient.
That's a really insightful observation. And as historians have noted, including those whose work you've likely come across, the straightforward transfer of power is often viewed with skepticism. The saga writers, writing much later, may have been trying to create a clear line of legitimacy for Norwegian claims to Orkney by linking it directly to the Norwegian king. A bit of retrospective justification, maybe.
So, less of a royal decree and more of a situation where Sigurd and his family saw an opportunity in a volatile region and took it, likely with a good bit of axe work involved?
That's a much more plausible scenario when you consider the realities of the time. Sigurd becoming Jarl likely involved local power dynamics, strategic alliances, and perhaps some forceful persuasion rather than just a simple gift from a distant king. And he didn't just stay put in Orkney and Shetland, did he? Your sources clearly show he had ambitions on the Scottish mainland.
Absolutely. The testimonies mention his crucial alliance with Thorstein the Red. Thorstein was a significant figure in his own right, the son of Olaf the White, a Viking king in Dublin and Northumbria, and Aud the Deep-Minded, a very influential woman. This connection really plugged Sigurd into a much larger and more powerful network that was reshaping the political map of the Irish Sea in Scotland, right?
Exactly, a real power network. Together, Sigurd and Thorstein launched a joint offensive into mainland Scotland. The sagas you've consulted credit them with conquering Caithness and Sutherland, pushing their control perhaps as far south as a place called Echdalsbaki, generally thought to be around the River Oikel or the Dornoch Firth. Some accounts even suggest they reached into Ross and Moray.
And it's these aggressive campaigns, this expansion of Norse control on the Scottish mainland, that earned Sigurd his famous nickname, the Mighty, or Riki in Old Norse. His power wasn't just inherited, it was actively built and maintained through military strength and strategic alliances, as your sources indicate.
Every good power player in these sagas seems to have a significant rival, and for Sigurd the Mighty, your sources point to Mael Brigte. The sagas rather unflatteringly refer to him as Mael Brigte Tusk, or Mael Brigte the Buck-Toothed, really emphasizing that prominent dental feature.
Mael Brigte was likely a local Pictish ruler, a Mormaer, which, as I understand from the background material, was a significant regional chieftain. His power base seems to have been in the region of Moray, a larger territory back then, possibly centered near modern-day Inverness. He represented the indigenous resistance to Sigurd's southward expansion, didn't he?
Precisely. So the conflict arose quite naturally from Sigurd's attempts to move into Malbrigte's territory and consolidate Norse control in northern Scotland. The saga account you shared tells us that Sigurd eventually challenged Malbrigte to a formal battle to settle their differences. They even agreed on the terms. 40 men per side. Sounds almost honorable by the standards of the time.
Almost. But this is where the saga introduces a classic element of Viking-era ruthlessness, doesn't it?
Oh.
Sigurd, perhaps anticipating treachery from Albrigte or simply being strategically ruthless himself, decided to bend the rules significantly in his favor.
Exactly. He arrived at the agreed-upon meeting place not with the promised 40 warriors, but with a whopping 80 men, cleverly concealing the extra troops by having 2 riders on each horse. Talk about a deceptive tactic. What was Malbrigte's reaction when he saw this?
According to the saga, Malbrigte, arriving with his 40 men, immediately recognized the deception. The account provides a very visual detail, saying he saw that each of Sigurd's horses had 2 men's legs on its flanks. Facing such overwhelming odds, Malbrigte reportedly turned to his men with a grim determination.
And what were his reported last words to his heavily outnumbered warriors, facing what must have seemed like certain death?
The saga quotes him as saying, "Kill at least 1 man before we die ourselves." A final, defiant act in the face of blatant betrayal. It really frames Sigurd's victory as less than glorious, doesn't it? Winning through such underhanded means. This seems important for the narrative that follows.
Absolutely. It sets up a kind of karmic backlash, perhaps. The battle itself was unsurprisingly one-sided. Despite what the saga describes as a fierce fight, Malbrigte's forces were overwhelmed. Malbrigte himself was killed, and Sigurd, in a display of dominance, personally beheaded his rival.
The exact location of this battle isn't pinpointed in the testimonies, is it? But given the territories they controlled and Sigurd's eventual burial place, we can make some educated guesses, as you mentioned.
Yes. Considering Sigurd was expanding south from Caithness and Sutherland, and Malbrigte's power base was likely around Moray and Inverness, with Sigurd being buried near Dornoch, it's probable the battle took place somewhere in the contested area of Easter Ross between these regions.
So Sigurd the Mighty has triumphed, expanded his territory through a rather sneaky tactic. Now for the victory celebrations, Viking style. And this is where the story takes an even darker and frankly bizarre turn, as the sources you shared detail.
Indeed. In a display of what we might politely call incredibly poor judgment, Sigurd had the heads of the slain enemies strapped to his men's saddles as trophies. And for his personal prize, he took the head of Malbrigte the Buck-Toothed, securing it firmly to his own saddle bow. Can you imagine that gruesome spectacle riding back?
It's a truly grim image, these severed heads bouncing along. And it's during this ride, as the saga recounts, that the truly unbelievable happens.
As the Orkneyinga Saga describes, while riding, Sigurd went to spur his horse and struck his leg against a protruding bucktooth from Mel Brigtay's head. It caused a scratch. Another translation you might have seen simply states that one of Mel Brigtay's prominent teeth scratched Sigurd's leg. Talk about irony.
Talk about it. The very feature that earned Mel Brigtay his unflattering nickname became the instrument of his, well, not exactly his revenge, but certainly his posthumous impact on his conqueror.
And initially, it might have seemed like a minor injury, a mere graze. But remember, this was the 9th century, long before modern medicine. That seemingly insignificant scratch became infected. The saga describes the leg becoming inflamed and swollen. In modern terms, this was very likely sepsis, a severe bacterial infection.
And incredibly, within days, Sigurd the Mighty, the powerful Earl of Orkney, conqueror of lands, victor over Mel Brigtay, was dead, all thanks to a scratch from the severed head of his defeated foe. You really couldn't make this stuff up. It's a stark reminder of how precarious life could be.
It's an astonishing twist, and while it sounds outlandish, from a medical standpoint in the 9th century, it's surprisingly plausible. The human mouth, even after death, harbors a multitude of bacteria. A break in the skin, even a small one, was an open invitation for infection to take hold and spread throughout the body, triggering a potentially fatal response.
Absolutely. We have the benefit of modern medicine and our understanding of germ theory, but back then, well, they wouldn't have known about specific bacteria, obviously, but they would have certainly recognized the signs of a severe infection, the swelling, the pain, the inflammation, and they might have even connected it to the contact with the dead man's tooth, perhaps attributing it to some kind of ill omen or vengeful spirit.
Right. While they might have tried rudimentary remedies like honey poultices, which do possess some antibacterial properties, they would have been largely ineffective against a systemic infection like sepsis. So, while the story is incredibly bizarre, the actual mechanism of death is grimly realistic for the time period.
And what became of Sigurd's remains? Where was this mighty, albeit incredibly unlucky, Earl finally laid to rest, according to the testimonies?
The Orkneyinga Saga tells us he was buried in a hauger, a burial mound, known as Sigurd's How, located at Ecclesbaki, which, as we discussed, is believed to be near the river Oikel, or the Dornoch Firth, marking the southern extent of his conquests.
And the strongest contender for the location of this Sigurd's How is Cider Hall Farm, near Dornoch in Sutherland, right? The place name itself is quite suggestive.
That's correct. The name Cider Hall is believed to be a corruption of Sigurd's How, with historical records showing similar place names dating back centuries. It aligns with the saga's description of being at Ecclesbaki.
So we have a promising location. Has archaeology from the sites you've researched confirmed the existence of Sigurd's tomb there?
Sadly, no definitive archaeological confirmation yet. While there is an interesting oval earthwork enclosure at the likely spot, it hasn't been conclusively identified as Sigurd's burial mound through excavation. It's challenging to date these earthworks precisely without digging, and there's even a possibility it could be a prehistoric site that Sigurd was later buried within, kind of reusing an older sacred spot, maybe.
And it seems the site might have faced some disturbances over the centuries as well, making archaeological confirmation even harder.
Yes. There are mentions of potential stone robbing over time, and even a rather unfortunate incident during World War II when a home guard trench was dug right through the potential mound site. No specific finds being reported from that, unfortunately. So, while we have a strong candidate location based on place names and local tradition, Sigurd's final resting place remains archaeologically unconfirmed. Finding it would be a really significant discovery.
This whole story is so extraordinary. It makes you really consider how much of it you can actually rely on. As we've discussed, our primary sources are the Orkneyinga Saga and Heimskringla, medieval Icelandic texts written centuries after Sigurd's life.
Exactly. These sagas are invaluable historical narratives, offering unique insights, but they are also literary works with their own purposes and potential biases. The authors were Icelandic scholars or clerics writing for their own audience, perhaps with their own perspectives on the history of Orkney and its relationship with Norway.
So you have to approach them with a critical eye, not taking everything as literal truth, especially the more fantastical elements like the death by tooth, given the time that had passed and the nature of oral tradition.
Absolutely. As we touched on earlier, details like King Harold Fairhair directly granting the earldom are now often viewed with skepticism by historians who have studied the period in detail. These could be later additions intended to legitimize Norwegian claims. It sort of tidies up the history, you know?
And what about the death story of Self? The almost perfect irony of the bucktooth being the agent of his demise. It feels almost too perfect, too neat for the messy reality of life.
That's a really astute point. Some modern commentators consider the entire death story apocryphal, even fantastical, precisely because of this seemingly perfect poetic justice. Real life rarely follows such a well-defined narrative arc. It's quite possible the saga preserved a powerful legend about Sigurd's death, a story that evolved over centuries of retelling to emphasize themes of hubris, betrayal, and fate, rather than a strictly accurate historical or medical account.
So if the severed head story is more legend than literal truth, what other, perhaps less dramatic possibilities might explain Sigurd's death at a relatively young age?
Well, the sagas don't offer any alternative explanations, which is typical for these kinds of narratives once a compelling story takes hold. However, the most plausible scenarios, stripped of the dramatic flair, are that he died from complications of a wound received in the battle against Malbrigte itself, or perhaps from an unrelated illness that happened to coincide with his return. The tooth detail could have been a later, incredibly vivid addition to make the story more memorable and meaningful.
And it certainly worked. It's a story that sticks with you precisely because of its sheer strangeness. It serves as a dark, cautionary tale, fits the often grim and ironic tone of saga literature, and continues to fascinate people centuries later. You see it pop up in online discussions in popular culture even now.
Indeed. Online discussions often mirror historians' skepticism, questioning the likelihood of a scratch from a tooth causing a fatal infection with such speed and certainty. Some even compare it to modern urban legends' unbelievable but persistent stories. But whether it's historical fact or a captivating piece of folklore, the tale of Sigurd and the vengeful head has certainly achieved lasting fame.
And Sigurd's bizarre death didn't just make for a good story for future generations. It had immediate political consequences, plunging the Earldom of Orkney into instability around 892 AD, according to the timeline we have.
Yes, his son Guttorm inherited the title, but, as the sagas relate, died childless after only a single winter, a very brief rule. This led to Sigurd's brother Rogvald, back in Norway, having to appoint another of his sons, Halad, as Earl.
And Halid didn't exactly prove to be a capable ruler in this turbulent environment, did he?
Not at all. The accounts suggest he was ineffective in dealing with ongoing Viking raids, possibly by Danes who saw an opportunity in the power vacuum created by Sigurd's unexpected death. Halad ended up resigning his earldom and returning to Norway in, shall we say, less than glorious circumstances, where he was apparently the subject of some ridicule. They called him useless, basically.
It really underscores how crucial strong, decisive leadership was in maintaining control of these newly conquered and often contested territories. Sigurd's sudden and strange demise created a real crisis in the Northern Isles.
The earldom was eventually stabilized by another of Rogvald's sons, Thorfeinar, who went on to establish a more lasting dynasty. But those initial years immediately following Sigurd's death were certainly a period of significant upheaval, directly demonstrating the impact of his unusual end on the political landscape.
So how is Sigurd the Mighty remembered today? He was clearly a significant figure in establishing Norse power in Scotland, but what's his lasting legacy beyond this incredible death story?
While he is recognized by historians for his role in establishing the Norse Earldom of Orkney and expanding Norse influence in northern Scotland, there's absolutely no doubt that his enduring fame, the reason his name still pops up centuries later, stems primarily from the sheer strangeness and dark irony of his death. It's the anecdote that everyone remembers and retells.
And the Orkneyinga Saga itself, as you pointed out, is the primary vehicle for this memory. It's more than just a historical document for the people of Orkney. It's a foundational text that connects them to their Norse heritage and keeps stories like Sigurd's alive.
Absolutely. And even today, you can find tangible links to the story, like the continued association of the cider hall area with Sigurd's How, keeping the narrative alive in the local folklore and place names. His story is also part of the broader tapestry of Norse influence on the language, culture, and place names of northern and western Scotland.
It's fascinating how this story has gained even more traction in the digital age. It's almost tailor-made for sharing online, a quick, bizarre historical tidbit with a morbid twist that's guaranteed to get a reaction on social media and history forums.
Precisely. You see it pop up in Reddit threads, history blogs, even that show 1000 Ways to Die, demonstrating its enduring appeal to our collective, morbid curiosity. The unique combination of Vikings, violence, irony, and that sense of almost karmic justice makes it an irresistible tale to recount.
So Sigurd's peculiar legacy, for better or worse, rests on this one unbelievable fact. He was the mighty Viking Earl who was reportedly killed by a dead man's tooth. Forget what you learned in school. This is history's unhinged side.
Exactly. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the most memorable figures in history aren't those who achieved the greatest victories or ruled the longest, but those whose stories take the most unexpected and bizarre turns.
Before we wrap up this bizarre journey into the life and very strange death of Sigurd the Mighty, let's delve into our Viking trivia arsenal, some deep cuts and key details from the testimonies we've examined. First off, Mel Brigtay's defiant last words, facing overwhelming odds. Kill at least one man before we die ourselves. A grimly heroic sentiment that speaks to the warrior ethos of the time.
And the saga's vivid and somewhat humorous image of Male Brigtay realizing Sigurd's treachery, seeing that each of Sigurd's horses had two men's legs on its flanks. You can almost picture his dawning horror and the immediate understanding of the unfair fight to come, that moment of realization.
And the saga's straightforward, almost understated description of the fatal wound's progression. The wound began to swell and ache, and it was this that led to the death of Sigurd the Powerful. A simple but stark depiction of how a seemingly minor injury could have such devastating consequences in that era.
We also have a rundown of key geographical locations that feature prominently in Sigurd's story. Orkney in Shetland, his primary earldom base. Caithness in Sutherland, the mainland territories he successfully conquered. Moray, likely Male Brigtay's main area of control. Ecclesbaki, the southern limit of Sigurd's conquests and the traditional area of his burial. The River Oikel in Dornoch Firth, the likely location of Ecclesbaki. Ciderhall near Dornoch, the probable location of Sigurd's How. Inverness, likely Male Brigtay's power center. And even Dingwall further south, with its Old Norse place name suggesting a broader Norse influence in the region than maybe just Sigurd's conquests.
And while the exact location of Sigurd's How remains elusive, archaeology provides us with a broader picture of Viking Age life in Orkney and the surrounding areas. We have fascinating settlement sites like Jarlshof and the Borough of Beersay, the discovery of pagan graves containing weapons and jewelry offering insights to burial practices, and the tantalizing, unexcavated earthwork at Ciderhall still holding its secrets. That mystery mound.
It's also worth remembering, as you delve further into this period, the recurring theme of internal strife and succession disputes within the Orkney earldom after Sigurd's death. It highlights that his chaotic end wasn't an isolated incident in the history of the Northern Isles. It was a tough neighborhood, politically speaking. And that Norse place name Dingwall really does suggest a more widespread and potentially longer-lasting Norse presence on the mainland than just the territories Sigurd directly controlled during his lifetime. Administrative centers, maybe.
If this bizarre journey into the life and death of Sigurd the Mighty has sparked your curiosity and you want to explore this fascinating period further, our Curiosity Cabinet is stocked with recommendations. For primary sources, the Penguin Classics translation of the Orkneyinga Saga by Paulson and Edwards is an excellent and accessible starting point.
That's the one I usually recommend, yeah.
Older translations are also available online if you're interested in comparing different interpretations. And don't overlook Heimskringla by Snorri Sturluson for a broader historical context of the Norwegian kings and their interactions with the Viking settlements in the West.
For scholarly works that offer deeper analysis and context, William P. L. Thompson's The New History of Orkney is a comprehensive resource, really solid. You'll also find valuable insights in the works of historians like Barbara E. Crawford, Brian Smith, Judith Jesch, Colleen Beatty, and James H. Barrett, who have all made significant contributions to our understanding of the Viking Age and Scotland and the Northern Isles. Lots of great scholarship there.
For reliable online resources, OrkneyJar.com is an absolute treasure trove of information on Orkney's history, archaeology, and folklore. Seriously, great site.
Oh yeah, Orkneyjar is fantastic.
The Historic Environment Scotland and Highland Historic Environment Record websites are invaluable for researching specific archaeological sites, including the potential location of Sigurd's How. And the National Museum Scotland website offers a fantastic way to explore Viking Age artifacts and learn more about the material culture of the period.
And while you might not find a dedicated documentary specifically on Sigurd's demise, look for broader programs focusing on the Vikings in Scotland, the history of the Orkney Islands, or even explorations of the sagas themselves. Podcasts like Stuff You Missed in History Class, History Extra, or Gone Medieval might have covered related topics or similar bizarre historical events. Just remember, while online forums and history blogs can be entertaining, always approach them with a critical eye and look for credible sources and citations. A lot of misinformation floats around.
So there you have it. Sigurd Eysteinsson, Sigurd the Mighty, the second Jarl of Orkney, a powerful Viking leader who carved out a significant territory in Scotland, reportedly killed by a dead man's tooth. It's a story that sounds almost too unbelievable to be true, yet it has echoed through the centuries in the sagas.
It really has.
Whether it's a perfectly preserved historical fact or a legendary tale embellished over time, it's undeniably captivating. The sheer irony of this mighty warrior being brought down by such a bizarre and seemingly insignificant detail is almost Shakespearean.
It really is, that element of hubris and downfall.
It serves as a stark reminder of the brutal and unpredictable nature of life in the Viking Age, where even a minor wound could have fatal consequences.
Absolutely. No antibiotics back then.
And it's a testament to the enduring power of a truly unhinged historical anecdote. Sigurd the Mighty played a significant role in shaping the Norse presence in Scotland. But his lasting fame, his place in the lifespan hall of infamy, will forever be tied to that single unbelievable fact. He was killed by a severed head. Forget what you learned in school, folks. Sometimes history doesn't just bite. It bites back with the teeth of your vanquished, decapitated enemy.
A truly bizarre legacy.
And that's a lifespan story if ever there was one. It really makes you wonder about all the other strange and forgotten stories lurking in the historical record, doesn't it? What else is out there waiting to be rediscovered?